the quiet world of Paris streets. Before we wander into history, I invite you to rest. Find a comfortable position. Let your body sink into the bed and take a slow, deep breath. The world outside can wait. Here, in this quiet moment, you can allow your thoughts to drift gently, like a feather on a soft breeze. Tonight, we will take a gentle walk through the streets of Paris, not in today's busy world, but in the slower, quieter days of the 18th century, a time when carriages rolled along cobblestone roads, when oil lamps flickered to life at dusk, and when the city moved at a calmer rhythm than we know today. You do not need to imagine rushing or noise or drama. Instead, picture yourself walking slowly, with no urgency, through the peaceful streets of old Paris. The story will carry you, step by step, deeper into rest. The day in 18th century Paris often began with the faint sound of church bells. Their tone, carried gently across the rooftops, marked the rhythm of time for the people. The bells did not demand attention. They simply rang, soft and steady, reminding the city that morning had come. As the first light touched the rooftops, the narrow streets glistened faintly with dew. The cobblestones, worn smooth by countless footsteps, seemed to hold the memory of the many who had walked before. Street sweepers moved slowly, brushing away the dust of yesterday with long straw brooms. Their movements were steady and calm, a rhythm as old as the city itself. Bakers were often the first to rise. From their ovens, the scent of bread drifted into the air, warm, earthy, and comforting. Loaves of pain, decampage, and golden croissants were laid carefully onto wooden boards, ready to be carried out into the streets. For the people of Paris, this smell of bread was not just food, it was reassurance, a daily comfort, the scent of life continuing as it always had. The streets were quiet at this hour. A carriage might pass, its wheels creaking gently over the stones. A milk seller could be heard calling softly as he delivered his goods from door to door. But mostly, there was stillness. The city had not yet woken fully, and in this soft moment, Paris seemed more like a village than a great capital. By mid-morning, the stillness gave way to gentle movement. The markets of Paris slowly filled with life, though even here the pace was unhurried. Merchants arranged their goods carefully, laying out baskets of apples, pears, and plums. Fishmongers set blocks of ice beneath their stalls, keeping their morning catch cool and fresh. The market was not loud, it was more like a murmur, a low hum of voices rising and falling. People bartered softly, exchanging coins with measured gestures. Women in simple dresses carried baskets on their arms, pausing to greet neighbors or linger over a choice of herbs. Children darted between the stalls, but even their play seemed slower, gentler, shaped by the rhythm of the city. The air was filled with the sweetness of fruit, the saltiness of fish, the spice of dried herbs, and always the ever-present fragrance of bread. Dogs wandered quietly among the people, tails wagging slowly, hoping for scraps. The buildings that surrounded the markets leaned slightly inward, their tall, narrow shapes casting long shadows across the stalls. Wooden shutters hung open, and on balconies above, linens drifted softly in the breeze. It was not grandeur that gave Paris its character in these hours. It was these small and simple details, repeated day after day, creating a tapestry of quiet life. As the sun rose higher, the city grew warmer. Shadows shortened, and the narrow streets became brighter. People went about their daily business. Prentices carried tools. Messengers moved swiftly with small notes tucked in their coats, and shopkeepers opened their shutters to display their wares. Yet, even in the busiest hours, there was no sense of hurry. The rhythm of Paris was steady, like a slow heartbeat. Horse-drawn carriages passed along the main boulevards, their wheels clattering gently, while in quieter lanes one might hear only the faint murmur of voices and the soft creak of wooden doors. Small cafes offered cool drinks and places to sit. Writers and thinkers often lingered there, scribbling with quills on scraps of paper, speaking in hushed tones with friends. Ideas of philosophy and science floated gently in the air. But even these conversations carried no urgency. They unfolded slowly, with pauses, as though each word had time to settle before the next was spoken. For those walking through the streets, the midday air was filled with simple sounds, the distant toll of bells, the rhythm of footsteps, and the occasional laughter carried lightly from a nearby window. It was a city alive, but never restless. As the day drifted into the afternoon, the city seemed to settle into a gentle rhythm of work. The morning bustle of the markets faded, and now the quieter sounds of craft and labor filled the streets. If you walked slowly through the neighborhoods of Paris, you would hear the soft tap of a cobbler's hammer against leather, repairing a shoe with careful, steady strikes. You might pass a workshop where a carpenter smoothed wood with a plane, the shavings curling softly onto the floor. The air smelled faintly of sawdust and polished oak, carrying with it the calm, reassuring scent of steady work. Blacksmiths, too, worked in their forges, though their hammer strikes were measured and unhurried, sending sparks briefly into the air before fading again into stillness. The warmth of the forge spilled into the street, mixing with the cooler breezes that drifted along the alleyways. Women might be seen sitting by open windows, sewing or embroidering by the light of the sun. Their hands moved with practiced ease, pulling thread through fabric, stitch after stitch, creating patterns that grew quietly beneath their fingers. Children played in shaded courtyards, their voices gentle, their games simple, rolling hoops, skipping, or chasing each other slowly along the stones. Life in these hours was not dramatic or hurried. It was patient, steady, almost timeless. Every sound seemed softened by the narrow streets, as though the city itself wanted to rest in the afternoon warmth. By the cafes became gathering places for the thoughtful and the leisurely. Small tables stood outside on cobblestones, shaded by awnings or trees. The scent of coffee and chocolate filled the air, both of them newer pleasures in the city, carried by trade from faraway lands. Reuters sat with quills, dipping them slowly into ink, pausing often to think before setting words onto paper. Their notes, journals, and letters were written in long, looping script, the kind that seemed to flow as gracefully as the pace of life around them. Nearby, conversations rose and fell in gentle tones. People spoke of the theater, of new books, of ideas about science and philosophy. The words were not hurried arguments, but slow, thoughtful exchanges, punctuated by quiet laughter. From time to time, a street musician passed by, a fiddler, perhaps, or a flute player offering a soft tune to those who lingered at the tables. Coins were dropped with a smile, and the music carried lightly down the street, blending with the hum of voices and the faint clatter of cups. In these cafes, the heart of Paris beat gently, in rhythm with the city's slower hours. Afternoon strolls along the Seine. As the hours passed, some Parisians left the narrow streets to walk along the Seine. Wide and calm, reflected the afternoon sky in gentle ripples of silver and blue. Bridges stretched across it, their arches carrying carriages and walkers between the two banks. Couples strolled slowly, their steps measured, their voices soft. Children leaned over the stone balustrades, watching boats drift below. Barges carried goods barrels, sacks, crates, while smaller boats carried fishermen or ferrymen, who guided their craft with steady oars. The air smelled faintly of water, mingling with the scents of the city, the smoke of hearths, the sweetness of fruit stalls, the earthiness of animals. Yet here, by the river, it all seemed gentler, softened by the sound of flowing water. Vendors sold roasted chestnuts and sweet pastries to those passing by. The smoke curled upward in thin ribbons, catching the light of the sun. Street artists sketched passersby, their charcoal strokes quick yet quiet, as though capturing not only the likeness of a person, but also the calmness of the afternoon itself. The Seine was the slow, steady breath of Paris, carrying the city's life along its waters, always flowing, always calm. Quiet courtyards and gardens, away from the busier boulevards. Quiet courtyards offered another side of Paris. These enclosed spaces, often hidden behind heavy wooden doors, opened into small worlds of stillness. Gravel paths curved around flower beds, where roses and lilacs bloomed gently in the sun. Small fountains murmured softly, their water trickling into stone basins, creating a sound as calming as a lullaby. In these courtyards, one might see a child chasing a butterfly, or an old man sitting on a bench with a cane resting beside him. Women tended potted herbsmen, time while speaking softly to one another. Cats stretched lazily in patches of sunlight, their tails flicking slowly as if keeping time with the day. Some courtyards belonged to monks, where monks moved quietly along stone cloisters, their footsteps echoing softly. Others belonged to townhouses, where families rested in the calm shade after the morning's work. These hidden gardens were places where the city seemed to pause, offering gentle silence in the heart of Paris. As evening deepened in 18th-century Paris, the rhythm of the city shifted once again. Daytime brought merchants, deliveries, apprentices running errands, and the endless sounds of life. But as the sun fell and shadows stretched across the cobblestones, the streets softened into something gentler. Torches were lit outside taverns and shops, their flickering light casting uneven shapes upon stone walls. Oil lamps along main thoroughfares provided a modest glow, though entire neighborhoods could remain in darkness. Imagine yourself walking slowly, hearing only your own steps and the faint echoes of others, carried softly through narrow alleys. The sounds of the evening were different, less about the clatter of commerce, and more about voices winding down from windows above. Families gathered in small rooms, and if you listened closely, you might hear snippets of lullabies sung to children, or the faint hum of someone mending clothes by candlelight. Now and then the distant toll of church bells drifted through the air, reminding Parisians of both time and faith, as well as the unchanging rhythm of city life. Markets that had bustled with shouting and haggling only hours earlier grew quiet, yet the smells lingered: baked bread cooling on racks, fruit peels tossed into the gutters, roasted chestnuts still warm from their vendors' fires. The faint aroma of herbs and spices clung to the air outside apothecary shops, while leather goods left a sharper, heavier scent near craftsmen's workshops. All these smells mingled with the smoky breath of wood and coal fires that heated homes. For a modern visitor, this mixture might seem overwhelming, but to Parisians of the 18th century, it was the very perfume of daily life. Even the pace of animals slowed. Horses pulled fewer carts at night, and dogs, often strays wandering freely, curled themselves into corners, sleeping against warm stones. Cats prowled silently, climbing onto roofs or darting between barrels in search of scraps. It was a world both lively and hushed, familiar and mysterious. Some evenings, if you were to stroll near the Seine, you might see figures leaning against the railings of bridges, quietly watching the river flow in the moonlight. The Seine reflected lanterns and stars alike, its surface rippling softly with the current. Couples sometimes lingered there, whispering in hushed tones, their voices blending with the water's steady sound. Traders who lived near the docks could be found repairing nets or tightening ropes, their work illuminated by a single lamp swinging in the breeze. For travelers, the streets of Paris at night were a revelation. The grandeur of the city's monuments, the Louvre, Notre Dame, and countless churches took on a different kind of beauty. Half hidden, their outlines softened by night. Not every street was safe, of course, and night watchmen with lanterns patrolled certain quarters, reminding all who passed by to keep careful. But even that presence added to the calm rhythm of the city, like guardians ensuring the peacefulness of slumber. And as midnight approached, Paris seemed to breathe in unison. The great city, alive with so many voices, trades, and dreams, quieted into a steady rhythm. The world slowed, and so too did the heartbeat of its streets. Imagine yourself there, sitting quietly on a bench beneath an oil lamp, listening to the city's pulse. A gentle breeze carries the fragrance of bread and smoke, the sound of a distant bell, and the faint whisper of the Seine. It is here, in this quiet world, that you can let your mind rest, allowing the timeless streets of 18th century Paris to guide you toward peaceful sleep. As the night deepened, another layer of Paris revealed itself, its quiet routines, its hidden rhythms, and its slower heartbeats. For those who lived in the narrow side streets, life did not stop when the sun went down. Housewives might still be found at their hearths, stirring a pot of broth that would simmer gently until morning, filling the home with warmth. The soft crackle of firewood gave off a comforting sound, a steady rhythm, like the city's own lullaby. Children, tired from the day, would nestle into straw-filled mattresses. Some lay in attics, beneath wooden beams, where the faint glow of a lantern lit the rafters above. Others shared simple pallets, their soft whispers trailing off into sleep. Down below, fathers might take a final look at the lock on the door, or close the shutters tight against the cool night air. Small tasks, everyday rituals, shaped the peace of these hours. And beyond the homes, Paris itself seemed to sigh. The river Seine continued its endless journey, carrying reflections of torchlight upon its slow-moving current. On its banks, washerwomen's tools sat abandoned, wooden tubs left where they had been used that morning. By day, these banks were noisy and alive, but at night they seemed almost like a painting still, calm and touched with moonlight. In some quarters, the taverns remained open, their lights spilled into the streets, accompanied by the muted strum of a lute or the murmur of voices over cups of wine. These were not the raucous sounds of wild celebration, but the steady hum of companionship, neighbors sharing a simple story, perhaps, or travelers exchanging tales of roads they had walked. The faint clink of mugs being set down, mixed with laughter that quickly faded into the stillness of the street beyond. Further away, in the quieter residential alleys, another sound filled the night, the creak of wooden carts as night soil collectors went about their task. It was humble, uncelebrated work, but necessary for a great city to remain clean. Their lanterns bobbed along the streets, casting fleeting glows on walls and doorways before disappearing into shadow again. For most, it was a reminder that even in silence, life in Paris never truly stopped, like a melody played more slowly. Sometimes, from high windows, voices of musicians would drift into the night air. A violin, faint but clear, played for no audience except perhaps the household itself, and yet its sound touched the whole street. Those who lay in bed listening might find themselves carried into dreams by the sweetness of a tune they did not fully know. And then the bells always, the bells. Notre Dame, with its great voice, marked the passing of hours. Smaller parish churches joined in, their softer tones overlapping in a gentle harmony. Each bell was not just a measure of time, but a reminder that life moved forward steadily and peacefully, no matter what lay within the narrow streets. The city of Paris, for all its grandeur and complexity, found peace in these quiet hours, in the silence of the cobblestones, in the glow of an oil lamp, in the faint warmth of hearth fires. One could feel the city breathing, and if you listen carefully, you may find your own breathing fall into rhythm with its low, steady, and calm. As the hour crept closer to midnight, the streets of Paris grew quieter still. Only the faintest movements stirred the air, the gentle brush of wind through narrow alleys, the occasional bark of a distant dog, or the muffled rattle of shutters that had not been fastened tightly. For those lying awake in their wooden-framed beds, these sounds became a part of their night, soft reminders of life beyond their walls, steady and unobtrusive. By lantern light, some households still busied themselves. A seamstress, perhaps, continued her work, her needle rising and falling against the fabric with a steady rhythm. Each stitch, tiny and careful, held not just thread, but a piece of her evening. The small flame by her side flickered gently, casting shadows that stretched and folded against the walls. In another home, an old man sat with his pipe, watching the smoke curl upwards toward the low ceiling beams. The silence around him was comforting, wrapping him like a heavy wool cloak. The marketplace, which by day roared with vendors, animals, and shouting voices, now lay hushed. Stalls stood empty, their wooden frames covered in cloths, baskets and barrels stacked neatly to one side. One could sense the faint memory of voices, like an echo left behind in the cobblestones. But for now, it belonged only to the night. As the moon climbed higher, its silver light painted the streets in gentle tones. Roof tiles gleamed faintly, and the edges of stone carvings stood out softly against the dark. Balconies, with their wrought iron railings, cast patterned shadows onto the ground. The stillness gave the city an almost dreamlike quality, as if Paris itself had paused to rest. The river Seine, ever present, reflected the moonlight like liquid glass. A barge drifted silently along its current, guided by the push of water alone. From the banks, a listener might hear the faint lap of water against stone, steady and soothing, like the city's heartbeat. Across the bridge, the occasional echo of hooves on stone marked a late traveler's passage, fading into the distance as quickly as it came. For the poor, who lived in cramped quarters, the night offered little luxury but much peace. Straw beds, though simple, gave rest to tired bodies. Families huddled together for warmth, their breath rising faintly in the cool air. The smell of wood smoke clung to everything: blanket, hair, clothing, and yet it was a familiar, homely scent. It tied them to the rhythm of their lives, reminding them that even in scarcity, comfort could be found in the simple act of resting together. Meanwhile, for the wealthier citizens, tall windows revealed grander chambers. Four-poster beds with heavy curtains enclosed sleepers in warmth and privacy. On bedside tables, candles burned low, their wax forming slow, steady pools. Some fell asleep to the soft murmur of a servant's voice reading from a book, or the faint trickle of a fountain in a courtyard below. Yet, whether rich or poor, all shared the same night, the same moonlight, the same bells that told the slow march of time. In every corner of Paris, the night was not empty, but full of silence, of memory, of gentle rhythms that asked nothing more than to be noticed, and then to be forgotten as sleep claimed its place. And as you listen now, you too may begin to feel the pull of rest. The city's calm becomes your calm. Its quiet streets stretch out in your imagination, leading you deeper into a world where nothing is rushed, and where every moment flows like the Seine itself, unhurried and endlessly soothing. As the night deepened, a gentle mist began to form, rising softly from the river and curling through the lower streets. It blurred the edges of lantern light, wrapping the city in a pale veil. The mist muffled sound, too, so that even footsteps seemed distant and dreamlike. Anyone wandering the streets at this hour would feel as though they were moving through a painting. Each corner softened, each sound hushed into stillness. The watchmen, making their rounds, carried staffs and small lanterns. Their boots struck the stones in measured rhythm, steady and unhurried. Occasionally they would pause to check a doorway or to listen for any disturbance. Yet, more often than not, they walked in quiet companionship with the night itself. Their voices hushed, their breaths forming clouds in the cool air. The faint jingle of a keyring or the rustle of their cloaks became the loudest sound for a moment, before vanishing into the mist again. High above, the chimneys of Paris stood like silent sentinels. By day they released streams of smoke, marking the presence of countless hearths, kitchens, and firesides. But now, at night, most of them rested. A few, still glowing faintly, whispered trails of smoke into the starlit air. The scent of wood, of ash, and of food, long finished, lingered, faint but comforting, like a memory of supper. Along the narrow lanes, cats prowled quietly, their movements swift and light, unnoticed except for the occasional gleam of their eyes in lantern glow. They were the silent rulers of the streets, weaving between barrels and baskets, climbing low walls, and slipping unseen into shadow. In these quiet hours, the city seemed to belong to them more than to people. Inside the homes of Paris, the rhythm of rest continued. The poor, lying close together on straw, stirred only slightly when the wind rattled shutters. The wealthy, surrounded by carved wooden furniture, silk covers, and heavy drapery, slept deeply, their dreams cradled by comfort. Between them all, silence connected every household, whether grand or humble. Each door closed upon the same quiet, each sleeper embraced by the same still night. Sometimes faint music could be heard drifting across the city. From a late tavern, a fiddle played softly, its tune carried on the night air. The melody was not raucous, but low and slow, like a lullaby for those still awake. Perhaps it accompanied a final drink before bed, or perhaps it was simply a player enjoying the peace of the hour. For those nearby, it might lull them, too, the notes blending with the night until it was difficult to tell where music ended and silence began. The bells of Paris marked the hours with patient regularity. Each toll seemed to echo longer in the stillness, carrying across rooftops, through alleys, over the water. The sound was not sharp or sudden, but round and soft, a deep hum that rolled through the city like a slow heartbeat. Each bell carried with it a reminder that the night, too, had its rhythm of rest, of waiting, of calm. And so Paris breathed, slowly, gently, evenly. Streets inhaled mist and silence. Rooftops exhaled smoke and moonlight, and the river carried it all along in a steady flow. For those listening now, it is easy to imagine yourself walking these streets, your steps light, your body unhurried. Each corner holds no surprises, only peace. Each sound you hear blends into the background, until it becomes part of the silence itself. As the night stretched further, the city seemed to dissolve into layers of quiet. The air grew cooler, and the faint glow of moonlight softened the sharp lines of stone and wood. Streets that by day carried the clamor of carriages and the calls of merchants were now only pathways of shadow, touched here and there by the amber flicker of lanterns. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped from a rooftop into a small puddle, its rhythm steady and hypnotic. The sound blended with the soft rustle of wind, weaving through narrow alleys, stirring bits of straw and dust across the stones. These tiny sounds, almost hidden, became the music of the sleeping city. Windows, shuttered tightly for warmth, gave only faint hints of life within. Through a gap in the wood, a sliver of candlelight might escape, glowing softly before fading into the misty air. Behind those shutters, families rested. Children curled against one another beneath blankets, their breaths rising and falling in unison, their dreams untouched by the cares of the day. Parents, tired from work or from tending the home, sank deeply into sleep, their minds quiet at last. In wealthier quarters, tall townhouses stood in stately rows. Their facades looked elegant even at night, their carved details softened by shadow. Inside beds with carved posts and embroidered sheets held sleepers, who dreamed as deeply as the poorest citizen. Though the furnishings changed, the act of resting was shared by all, the common thread that tied every street, every household, every soul together in the same stillness. On the bridges, the Seine whispered its endless song. The water moved gently, carrying reflections of the moon and the lamps that lined the walkways. Occasionally, the ripple of a barge or the dip of an oar disturbed the surface, but the river quickly returned to calm, as though it, too, longed to sleep. The scent of water and stone mixed in the air, cool and familiar, filling the lungs of those who passed by. The stray dogs of the city padded quietly along the edges of the market squares, their paws nearly silent on the stones. They searched without hurry, noses close to the ground, finding scraps left from the day's trade. Their movements were calm, almost ritual-like, as though they, too, had become part of the slow rhythm of the night. Occasionally, one might stop, lift its head, and listeners turning toward some distant sound before resuming its gentle wander. Above it all, the stars shone with patient brilliance. Paris, with all its lights and lamps, could not entirely chase them away. Between rooftops, their faint glow shimmered, and for those still awake, they offered quiet companionship. Looking upward, one could feel the immense calm of the sky, eternal and unhurried, watching over the city's rest. And as you imagine these streets now, let yourself walk among them slowly. Each step feels lighter than the last. Each breath feels deeper, calmer. The night carries you gently forward, with no rush, no weight, only the endless quiet of a city at rest. As midnight settled deeper into the city, Paris entered its quietest hours. The hum of life slowed until only the faintest threads of sound remained. The groan of a wooden beam inside a home, the faint chirp of a night bird, the distant clop of a horse making its way along the cobbles. Each of these stood out against the sea of stillness, not as disturbances, but as gentle reminders that the city still lived, even in its rest. In the courtyards of the wealthier districts, small fountains trickled softly, their waters catching moonlight in silver glimmers. The sound of the falling water echoed gently between walls, rhythmic and constant, like a lullaby sung not for one person, but for an entire house. Those lying in their beds might drift into sleep with this sound in their ears, their dreams carrying them beyond the stone walls into realms even more peaceful than the streets outside. The marketplaces remained empty, their wooden stalls covered for the night. Baskets and crates sat stacked in corners, waiting patiently for morning. The smells of the day-fresh bread, smoked meat, and fruit lingered faintly in the air, mingling with the cooler scents of stone and water. These were the ghosts of the marketplace, remnants of the life that had filled it only hours earlier, now softened into memory as the city breathed in silence. In narrow alleys, laundry lines swayed gently in the night breeze. Shirts, skirts, and linens, hung by careful hands during the day, fluttered like ghostly figures in the moonlight. Yet there was nothing frightening in their movement, only a quiet poetry, the fabric rising and falling with the rhythm of the air. They, too, seemed to rest, waiting for the warmth of the morning sun to dry them completely. Farther away, near the edges of the city, gardens lay hushed beneath the sky. Orchards and vegetable plots, worked with care by day, now seemed almost wild in their stillness. Dew began to settle on the leaves, catching faint glimmers of light, as though the earth itself had dressed in tiny jewels for the night. The soft scent of soil, grass, and flowers mixed with the night air, creating a fragrance that could calm even the most restless heart. And all through Paris, the bells continued their patient work. At each quarter hour, their tones rolled across the rooftops, deep and resonant, but never harsh. To those already asleep, they were only part of the dream. To those still awake, they were steady companions, gentle markers of time passing, not in haste. The city seemed to whisper to itself, not in words, but in sensations, the coolness of the stones, the softness of the mist, the faint hum of life in its quietest form. And for those who listened closely, but filled with countless tiny details, each one delicate, each one calm. As you rest now, imagine yourself lingering here a little longer, among these quiet streets. With each breath, feel the weight of the day loosen and fade. Let the rhythm of Paris at night guide you, low, steady, peaceful, till your own body mirrors the calm of the city, until you, too, drift gently into rest. In the quiet hours after midnight, Paris felt almost like a secret world, hidden away from the noise and urgency of daytime life. The wide boulevards, with their carefully arranged trees and lampposts, stood deserted. Their empty expanse seemed to stretch endlessly, as though they belonged not to the city, but to a dream. The flickering glow of oil lamps marked the way in soft circles of light. But beyond those small halos, the streets faded into darkness, leaving only the imagination to fill their edges. Closer to the heart of the city, narrow lanes wound between buildings that leaned inward, their upper floors almost touching. Shadows deepened here, creating pockets of calm so thick that even sound seemed hesitant to enter. Only the faint brush of a passing breeze disturbed the stillness, carrying with it the distant smell of bread baked earlier in the evening, or the sharper scent of smoke from a dying fire. Everywhere there was a sense of pause, of waiting. It was not a heavy pause, but a restful one, as though the entire city had chosen to breathe slowly, deeply together. The stones beneath one's feet carried the coolness of the night, while the air held the freshness of dew, beginning to gather on rooftops and window ledges. Each breath taken in this silence felt lighter, calmer, as though the weight of the world had gently lifted away. Here and there, a single candle might still burn in a window, perhaps kept by someone who could not yet sleep, or someone lost in thought. The light glowed softly against the glass, creating a faint circle of warmth in the otherwise shadowed street. Seen from a distance, these scattered candles looked like stars that had descended to the earth, tiny reminders of wakeful lives amid the great hush of night. The Seine remained constant, its waters gliding under the bridges with a steady murmur. From certain spots, the rippling sound was clear and soothing, echoing softly against the stone embankments. To walk near the river was to feel as though one were being carried along by its rhythm, each step in harmony with its flow. The water reflected the moon in trembling patterns, turning the surface into a shifting sheet of silver. Even in its movement, the river was unhurried, timeless, as if it had all the patience in the world. A faint rustle in the distance might come from a carriage making a late return, the wheels rolling slowly, the horses' hooves striking the cobblestones in a measured beat. But such sounds, instead of disturbing the stillness, seemed to join it, becoming part of the city's soft rhythm. Soon enough, even these faded into silence, leaving the streets once more to their calm. Above, the sky stretched endlessly. Clouds drifted lazily, veiling and unveiling the stars. When the moon shone free, its light poured down onto Paris, washing over rooftops, church spires, and quiet courtyards. It was a gentle light, pale and forgiving, softening every edge and corner into something dreamlike. The night did not erase the city, it simply transformed it, clothing it in serenity. And as you imagine these quiet streets, you may find that your own thoughts slow to match their pace. Each sound is softer, each image calmer, and each breath brings you deeper into this gentle stillness, as though Paris at night is not just a place in history, but a place within yourself where rest and peace are always waiting. As the night stretched deeper, even the smallest details of Paris seemed to slow, as though time itself was resting. The shutters on townhouses, tightly closed, hid the lives within, yet their presence suggested warmth and safety. Behind those walls, families lay in slumber, their dreams unfolding in the silence of the night. The city was vast, but in these moments it felt tender and close, like a single household quietly asleep. Every now and then, the faint creak of wood might be heard, the gentle sigh of an old sign swinging on its iron bracket, or the quiet settling of beams within a house that had stood for decades. These sounds were not intrusions, but reminders of the age and endurance of the city. They belonged to its history, whispering softly into the present, carrying with them the weight of all that had come before. The courtyards, tucked behind gates and archways, were pools of shadow. Within them, ivy-climbed stone walls and fountains stood silent, their water still for the night. By day, these spaces might echo with footsteps or the chatter of neighbors, but now they were sanctuaries of stillness. The faint perfume of flowers, closing their petals until dawn, lingered in the air. If one paused long enough, it was possible to feel the coolness of the stone beneath the skin, a soothing reminder of the calm earth that held the city steady. Above the rooftops, church bells remained quiet, their silence as significant as their sound. The towers stood watchful, silhouettes against the night sky. Their presence offered a kind of reassurance, as though even in silence they promised continuity and care. But until then, the night was theirs to guard. Holding the city in a cradle of rest, the bells would ring again at dawn. And so Paris slept. It was not the restless sleep of a place burdened by worry, but the deep, collective slumber of a city that trusted the night to keep it safe. Streets, rivers, buildings, and sky all seemed united in their stillness, forming a lullaby of calm for anyone who wandered within it. To walk these streets in the quiet hours was to step into a dream woven of history, stone, and silence. And as your mind follows these calm images, your own breath may begin to deepen, your body loosening into comfort, Just as Paris surrendered to the night, so too may you, finding rest in the hush that has carried across centuries, always gentle, always waiting. As dawn lingered just beyond the horizon, the city remained wrapped in its quiet embrace. The air was cool, carrying with it the faintest traces of smoke from hearths that had burned low through the night. The Seine, ever steady, whispered softly as its waters flowed beneath stone bridges, their arches dark and silent. Lanterns that once glowed with amber light were dimmed, their oil nearly spent, leaving behind the faint scent of wax and flame. In some corners, cats moved lightly, slipping through alleys as though they alone belonged to the night. Their soft paws touched the cobblestones without sound, their shadows fleeting companions to the walls. These animals had learned the city's rhythms, knowing when to move unseen and when to disappear entirely. Their presence added a secret layer to the slumbering streets, a reminder that even silence holds subtle life. The bakers' ovens, long cooled after the last loaves of the day, held on to their warmth. Their walls seemed to hum with the memory of bread, the yeasty sweetness lingering faintly in the air. Tomorrow, before the sun had fully risen, new fires would be lit, and the scent of fresh bread would drift again through the streets, mingling with the dawn. But for now, it was a memory tucked gently into the fabric of the night. The faint rustle of leaves in small gardens, hidden behind Rotterdam gates, hinted at the breeze moving softly between buildings. These gardens were often modest patches of green, framed by stone, but they gave Paris its breathing spaces, its whispers of nature within the vastness of walls. The leaves shifted lightly, like pages in a book, adding a soothing rhythm to the stillness. As hours slipped by, unnoticed, time seemed less measured by bells or footsteps, and more by the steady breathing of the city itself. Night did not end abruptly in Paris. It yielded gradually, like a soft curtain being drawn aside. It allowed dreams to linger, letting those within its embrace drift peacefully from one moment to the next, undisturbed. And you, too, may find yourself sinking further into that gentle rhythm. With every image of these quiet streets, your mind may grow lighter, your body more at ease. Just as the city rests, so may you, carried along on the hush of centuries, a soft reminder that rest is timeless. As the night deepened once more, Paris lay cradled in its own quiet rhythm. The streets, the courtyards, the gardens, and the bridges all seemed to breathe together, wrapped in a silence that was never empty, but always full of gentle presence. Time slowed, not as numbers on a clock, but as soft impressions, the flicker of a candle, the sigh of the breeze, the distant hush of the Seine. The people of the city, whether in humble lodgings or grand houses, had all surrendered to slumber. Their dreams wove through the same night air, carried gently across rooftops and drifting down narrow lanes. Horses in their stables shifted softly, their steady warmth keeping them at peace. The last embers of hearth fires faded into dark red glow, and the lamps along the streets finally gave way to the stars above. Above the city, the night sky stretched endlessly, dotted with faint constellations, their light traveling across centuries to meet the sleeping city below. Somewhere, a clock tower's slow chime marked the passing of another hour. Yet the sound was not an interruption, it was part of the lullaby, a deep and measured reminder that time, too, was resting. Paris, in these quiet hours of the 18th century, was not the bustling city of markets, of carriages, of debates and noise. It was something gentler, an old friend breathing beside you in the stillness, keeping watch while you drifted into your own soft dreams. And as you rest here now, carried by these images of hushed streets and lantern-lit alleys, allow yourself to release the day. Let go of the sounds, the thoughts, the movement. Let your body sink deeper into comfort, like the city sinking into its night. The rhythm of Paris, steady and timeless, becomes your rhythm too. So close your eyes a little heavier. Breathe a little slower. Know that the streets are safe, the night is calm, and that rest will carry you gently, just as it has carried countless souls through the quiet hours of history. And with that, may you drift off softly, peacefully, and without effort into sleep. Good night.